Hey guys, how are you all doing? This is the MMA breakdown with my predictions for UFC Fight Night 57, Edgar versus Swanson, taking place in Austin, Texas on November 22nd. Um, Making this video pretty early on, far out from the fights, because I don't think I'll have time later to do this. So, yeah, it gives you guys a chance to watch this early, I guess. But just made my picks for Hunt versus Nelson, UFC 180. Check those out. And this card, I actually think is pretty good. This main card looks like a lot of interesting matchup. Guys I'm interested in seeing. Guys I care about, and just more than anything, pretty meaningful matchups, which is not something that's been typical of Fox Sports 1 or Fight Pass Fight Night cards this year. But this looks fairly solid. A weaker preliminary card, but the main card looks really strong. And obviously the main event. I think this is just fantastic. I mean, I kind of miss the days when the UFC would have the number one contender fights where they announced beforehand that the winner would fight for the title. And this is definitely that caliber of fight. We don't seem to get these too much anymore. But Edgar and Swanson, definitely without a question. McGregor, I love him. He's been awesome, really impressive. I think he should fight for the title next. But Edgar and Swanson, definitely the number 1 and 2 contenders. I think this is a fantastic matchup. But let's get into the card, run through all the fights, and I'll give you my predictions. Starting off with the UFC Fight Pass preliminary card at featherweight, Juan Manuel Puig versus Du Ho Choi. Du Ho Choi. Sorry. He's a newcomer that I don't know anything about, so not going to make a pick here. Juan Manuel Puig. He fought Adriano Martins back in July on the Tough 19 finale, and that's a real tough assignment for his debut. I think Martins is a really talented, underrated fighter, powerful striker, and Puig just tried to get in a firefight with him, and Martins ended up knocking him out. So I thought that was a pretty tough test, but other than that, we didn't really get to see too much of Puig's game. Landed a few leg kicks, I think, but can't make a pick here, obviously, and that's good. We can move on, and hopefully I can keep this video under 40 minutes. Women's strawweight fight, 2 newcomers, Paige Van Zant versus Kaylin Curran. Kaylin Curran, a Hawaiian fighter, I would assume she's out of the same camp as Holloway and Smolka, all of those Hawaiians who seem to have taken over the UFC in this past year. But I never followed women's MMA, Invicta or anything. I only follow the UFC really, so I don't know anything about these women. And again, we're gonna have to move on. Fox Sports 1 preliminary card at lightweight, Yves Edwards versus Akbar Arreola. The decline of Yves Edwards has been pretty sad for me. I remember when he fought Isaac Vallie-Flagg a couple of years ago and lost to this guy coming over from Strikeforce, so wasn't even a top fighter or anything, and lost that fight. And since then, actually, that was the first fight that set off his 4-fight losing streak that followed a knockout win over Jeremy Stephens, which is very impressive to this day. I mean, Stephens is one of the top contenders now at featherweight, and at his age, Edwards being able to knock him out, and then just struggling with all these lower level guys, it's kind of sad, but. Lost to Vallie-Flagg, lost a decision to Darren Cruikshank, but then against Medeiros got knocked out. That was overturned, but got knocked out pretty badly in that fight. And then against Piotr Hallman in his last fight, I thought he won the first round, was able to push up Hallman against the fence, work his creative, unorthodox striking game, landed some good elbows against the fence. But Hallman was just able to wear him down, drag him down with that wrestling in the later rounds, and choked him out later in the fight. So, I think Edwards is just too old for the game now. But with that being said, Akbar Arreola, I think, looked like a very low-level talent in his last fight against Thiago Trator Silva. Just kind of got outclassed on the feet. Didn't really get hurt at any point in the fight, but Trator Silva just really outstruck him thoroughly, and Arreola looked fairly stiff and uncomfortable on the feet and had no answer for him. So, with that being said, I still think Edwards, he has good crafty striking when he's able to get off and, work that unorthodox striking. So I think he'll have no problem at least getting a decision here over Akbar Arreola. So I feel confident in taking Yves Edwards. And next up on the card at lightweight, James Vick taking on Nick Hein. I think they call him the Sergeant. Yes. Nick Hein fought on the Berlin card back in May, fought Drew Dober, who I think is another really low-level talent in the UFC, the guy who looked terrible against Sean Spencer. And Dober was able to make that fight competitive. I think people really overrated Hein. I'll admit he has an intriguing mix of judo, a judo game, and real overhand power strikes, which seemed to be the only tool in his striking game. Just threw that left overhand over and over again. A stocky German fighter, but James Vick, kind of the exact opposite build, real tall, long and lanky for the division. Came off of tough The Ultimate Fighter 15, lost to Michael Chiesa in the house, but did really well in the house. Has wins over guys who've had some success in the UFC now. Darren Cruikshank had a knockout win over him and a win over Joe Proctor. Showed solid boxing in the house, was even beating Michael Chiesa up until the end of the fight, where he just got taken down and pounded out all within a period of about 15 seconds. Was solid on the feet since coming in the UFC. Had a great submission win over Ramsey Nijim, choked him out with a power guillotine early in that fight. And then his last fight kind of struggled against Walmir Lazaro. Kind of a sloppy back and forth brawl. Was able to escape with a narrow decision there. But I think against Nick Hein, who has that heavy, stocky build, I think Vick's going to be able to use his length and outstrike him from outside. And against Drew Dober, Nick Hein seemed to kind of slow down and tire as the fight went on, and really almost the whole fight fought with his back against the fence. Was able to fire back and still win from there, but couldn't get to the center of the cage. So I think Vick's going to be able to win this with his length and his distance range striking. Next up in middleweight, Luke Barnatt versus Roger Narvaez. Narvaez dropping down from light heavyweight, where he lost to Kyle Kingsbury. Got stopped, I think, in the second round, taken down over and over again, couldn't stop the takedown and got pounded out. And on the other hand, Luke Barnatt, while he struggled with Sean Strickland in his last fight, Strickland being the shorter fighter, and somehow managed to out-jab Barnatt. Barnatt still had some impressive performances. I thought his finish over Andrew Craig, dropping him a couple times and finishing him off on the ground, and also his head kick knockout over Mats Nilsson were pretty impressive. Veteran of Tough 17. Against Nilsson, really showed a great jab, was able to piece him up a bit. I think, hurt him, and then with the head kick, put him away. Still developing that jab, though. As I said, Sean Strickland was able to out-jab him. But Luke Barnett's been pretty impressive, and Narvaez just got rolled over by Kingsbury, so I have to go with Barnatt. I think he wins this one easily. Heavyweight Ruslan Magomedov versus Josh Copeland. Copeland, newcomer that I don't know anything about. And Magomedov, I think he also fought on that Berlin card. Fought Victor Pesta. I don't remember that fight too well. Magomedov is a striker, though. Got taken down a few times in that fight, I think. And on the feet, seemed to land, have moments. He had moments where he landed a 1-2 combination that seemed to back up Pesta, but didn't really put combinations together and didn't go in for the kill. And I think he just, there's been a big influx of heavyweights in the UFC over the past 6 months, and Magomedov's one of these guys. I think he's just kind of going to dwell at the bottom of the division, but we can't make a pick here. So moving on to the Fox Sports 1 main card. Real excited for this main card. A lot of fantastic matchups. And starting things off, the return of Matt Handsome Wiman. Very excited to see this guy back. Matt Wiman versus Isaac Vallie-Flagg at lightweight. And I think this is just the perfect opponent for Wiman to come back against. I think he's just going to crush him, run over him. Vallie-Flagg, we talked about his win over Yves Edwards a couple years ago, coming over from Strikeforce, looked good. Was able to push Edwards up against the fence, worked some dirty boxing, but his fights since then, he's been absolutely terrible. Against Elias Silverio, just looked old and slow. Silverio was able to take him down, hurt him from the mount with ground and pound. And then against Takanori Gomi in his last fight, made it a brawl. Hurt Gomi on a few occasions. He's a tough guy, Isaac Vallie-Flagg, but really just a brawler. Pretty one-dimensional. Doesn't really have a wrestling game, at least that he's shown in the UFC. And hurt Gomi a few times, but Gomi was able to hurt him as well, and really just outstruck him on the feet. Pretty one-dimensional guy, just looking to get in your face and make it a brawl. And Wiman, if you're not familiar with him, definitely check out some of his old fights. I always really loved his performance against Cole Miller. A real aggressive guy, mixes up his takedowns very well with his striking. Very aggressive as well, but very different from the one-dimensional style of Vallie-Flagg that I just described. Against Dennis Seaver many years ago, had a pretty competitive fight, was able to mix his wrestling with his striking. Against Paul Sass, who had just been submitting everyone via triangle, had a win streak going there. Wiman went to the ground with him, was able to submit him with an armbar, so he's got submission skills. And then against TJ Grant in his last fight, Grant was one of the top contenders, and it's really sad what's happened to him. Hasn't been able to come back, but knocked out Wiman fairly easily in that fight with standing elbows. But Wiman, I think, is just going to win it with his striking and his wrestling, and I think he's just going to push a harder pace, and I think he'll finish Vallie-Flagg fairly easily first or second round, so I'm going with Matt Wiman here. Next up at flyweight, another just amazing matchup. I think this was supposed to be the headliner before Edgar and Swanson. Joseph Benavidez versus Dustin Ortiz. A fantastic flyweight fight. Really, flyweight's still an extremely thin division, but these guys are serious fighters in that division. But I got to go with Joseph Benavidez. Dustin Ortiz has been a nice kind of surprise addition to flyweight, has been able to pick up a few wins, finished Jose Maria Tomei in his debut, had a real tough fight with John Moraga where he was able to get him down. A lot of people thought he won that fight, but I thought he lost it and got outstruck on the feet. Against Ray Borg, who seems to be a strong talent, was able to out-grapple him. Did get his back taken in that fight a few times, but he's a real scrappy wrestler, a good scrambler, And then against Justin Scoggins, also that fight was mainly really only contested on the mat, and Dustin Ortiz was just able to get top position for more time. But Scoggins did have an armbar in that fight early on, almost finished him with it. I actually thought Scoggins won that fight, but Ortiz is definitely looking to get it to the mat and wrestle. But that's exactly Benavidez's game. That's his bread and butter. He's fantastic there. Even in his last fight against Timothy Elliott was able to get him in a crucifix early on. Benavidez got out and was able to get Mount and sub him with a guillotine from Mount. Benavidez has always been a great scrambling grappler with that guillotine choke forever. And obviously on the feet, very dangerous as well. I think he's really gonna. I think Ortiz is outmatched here on the feet. Also on the ground, I just don't think he's a good enough scrambler to grapple with Joseph Benavidez. Benavidez had that knockout win over Jussier Formiga early in the first round. Dodson couldn't even knock him out till the third round. Finished Darren Uyenoyama with shots to the body. So a very skilled striker and grappler, and I think he'll always be that contender at the doorstep of Demetrius Johnson, but we'll never really get over that hump, just getting knocked out by him last year. But I do expect him to win this pretty easily. I think he'll sub Ortiz early. Go with Benavidez. Next up, a heavyweight, another decent fight. Jared Rosholt, who I've been really impressed with, especially after his last win over Soa Paleli versus Alexei Oliynyk. Jared Rosholt really able to implement his wrestling game very well in MMA. He just looks like a collegiate wrestler out there. Even his first fight against Walt Harris got dropped and immediately went to his wrestling and was able to dominate with it for the rest of the fight. Out-wrestled Daniel Omielanczak, and then against Soa Paleli, who had just been crushing guys, knocking them out cold, mounting them and ground and pounding them out. Jared Rosholt really impressed me in that fight, was even able to outstrike him on the feet, hurt him on a few occasions as well, and then just Paleli couldn't deal with that hard-nosed, really skilled wrestling of Jared Rosholt. And Paleli even mounted him, I think, at the end of the first round and started wailing on him. Rosholt was able to survive, so I'm pretty impressed with Rosholt, and just he looks like he's on the collegiate wrestling mat out there, just able to wrestle guys, and they can't do anything about it. Alexei Oliynyk had a lot of hype coming in, I think, as a submission fighter, and I really showed it against Anthony Hamilton, who I think is awful, but finished him off got him down, worked ground and pound, and finished him off with a neck crank, which is pretty cool. So, Oliynyk, big, scary Russian guy with submission skills, might be able to give Rosholt a bit of trouble there, but I think the American wrestling wins out, so I'm going to take Rosholt to win a decision. Next up at flyweight, Brad One Punch Pickett versus Chico King Camus. This is another kind of interesting matchup. Brad Pickett's a guy I really respected at bantamweight. Thought he had a lot of great wins. I think he was a really underrated wrestler. This guy out-wrestled Demetrius Johnson way back. Was able to get a win over him. That was a long, long time ago, though. But even at bantamweight in the past few years, his fights against Damasio Page, knocking out Yves Jabouin with a big uppercut, out-wrestling Mike Easton, and even gave Michael McDonald a fairly tough fight. Was getting beat up pretty badly early on, but able to take down McDonald. But at flyweight, just looks like a fish out of water. Neil Seary was able to beat him to the punch. He's just way too slow for flyweight. really had to rely on his takedowns to beat Siri, and even with his takedowns, I'm not sure he won that fight. And against Ian McCall, just out jabbed. McCall was able to come in, land a strike, and get back out of range before Pickett even knew he was hit. And just isn't able to mix up his striking and his wrestling game like he could at bantamweight. I really think he needs to move back up. I don't think there's anything for him at flyweight. And Camus hasn't been the best fighter at flyweight either, but he's had a few good performances. Out grappling Dustin Page, got submitted by Dustin Kimura, got out grappled by Kyung Ho Kang, who I think is really underrated and just coming off of a great performance over Michinori Tanaka. But his fight against Yatsen Meza, which was overturned due to testing positive for marijuana, Camus was able to out grapple him pretty easily, dominated him, got mount for the entire fight. Meza being the much bigger guy, couldn't do anything about it. So I thought that was pretty impressive. But then against Chris Holdsworth in his last fight, lost a decision, but Holdsworth, the winner of the Ultimate Fighter, I think is a good talent and will do well. So I think Camus is kind of a gatekeeper somewhat at flyweight, but I just don't see Pickett having the quickness to out grapple him or out wrestle him on the feet. I think I think Pickett has the power advantage, but again, that speed disadvantage I think is really going to work against him. So I'm going to take Chico Camus here.
Alright guys, I had to break the video there, and it is now a new day, and I'm very sick, so my voice is all messed up. Forgive me, but we're not going to let that stop me. So we only have 2 more fights to go here, and we left off with Pickett and Camus. And now that I've had a little time to think about it, actually, Pickett, I think, could be the bigger, stronger guy, and probably has a good chance of out wrestling Camus. And Camus isn't his striking hasn't really been impressive or effective. He seems like a pretty average, even subpar striker. But I still think Pickett just has that big speed disadvantage. So I think I'll still go with Camus, but probably a lot closer than I had initially thought. But alright, on to the co-main event. Lightweight Bobby Green versus Edson Barboza. This is a really good matchup. Bobby Green, I've been really impressed with him since his first fight in the UFC, coming over from Strikeforce. That fight against Jacob Volkman was doing his usual thing, taking guys down, holding them there, and I think he won the first 2 rounds against Green, and then that third round, he just willed his way back and into victory. And then after that fight against Volkman, his next couple of fights, even against James Krause, I thought his boxing looked greatly improved in the Volkman fight. His boxing looked fairly basic. But against Krause, and then in his next fight against Pat Healy, his boxing just looks great. He looks like he has a very funky rhythm. Guys have a hard time timing him, and he has a real unorthodox timing and makes his boxing very effective. But against Barboza, against Healy, for as much as he was dominating that fight, for as many times as he hit Healy, was never really able to hurt him or put him away. Obviously beat him up, but was never close to finishing the fight. And against a guy like Barboza, who's extremely lethal on the feet, I don't think his striking's gonna be able to carry him 3 rounds with Barboza. And Barboza, obviously a really talented striker, He's had some setbacks. I don't view him as one of the elite guys at lightweight. A very dangerous guy, but I think he's just outside the top 10. But he hasn't lost a fight on the feet against another striker. The guys he's lost to have been the prototypical boxer wrestlers. Jamie Varner, and he did get knocked out there, but I mean he hasn't lost to guys who are gonna stand there and strike with him at range. The guys who've been able to beat him are the boxer wrestlers who can press him and throw big haymakers. It's actually kind of counterintuitive, against more skilled strikers like Enja Kawani, Pearson, those guys, he's been able to go the duration of the fight with them. But against more sluggers, more power-based strikers like Castillo and Varner, guys who aren't technically near his level at all, they're the guys that have been able to hurt him on the feet. But again, Bobby Green just hasn't shown the power. A very effective striker over 3 rounds. Guys have a hard time reaching him. In the Thompson fight, I was actually really impressed that he was able to keep that fight competitive. I thought he lost the fight, but I mean it was very close, razor thin win for him. But even Thompson, I thought he did connect on him more, but you could tell Thompson still had a really hard time reaching him. He just seems to be just out of range of his opponent's strikes. But Barboza, very lethal on the feet, was doing great against Cerrone before he got dropped with a jab. His chin might be a little suspect. I mean, Castillo dropped him. I count that as a loss, by the way, the fight against Castillo. Castillo got robbed out of a draw in that fight. But the fight with Cerrone, he was lighting him up early, and then in his next fight against Evan Dunham, just destroyed him with a kick to the body. A lot of power in his kicks. Had that spinning wheel kick KO on Terry Edom a couple years back. So I have to go with Barboza here. In a stand-up fight where both guys are going to be striking at range, I have to go with Barboza. I just think he's more lethal, more dangerous. He hasn't lost those kinds of fights. And Bobby Green, I say striking at range, but Green, I think, he does close the distance more with that boxing game, and doesn't seem to throw many kicks. But standing in front of Barboza for 3 rounds, that's how he has to win the fight. And I don't think he can do it. I think Barboza will be able to connect on him at some point or another. So I see Barboza getting a knockout here, a TKO, or winning a decision. I just don't think Bobby Green can outstrike him for 3 rounds. Barboza's too unorthodox and too dangerous on the feet. So I have to go with Barboza. And next up, the main event, featherweight, Frankie Edgar versus Cub Swanson. And like I said at the beginning, this is just a fantastic fight. Clearly, number 1 and 2 guys in the division. You have Lamas coming off of a big win this past weekend over Dennis Bermudez. McGregor's right there, and I think he should get... He'll get his shot too, but I really think Swanson and Edgar, the winner of this, deserves the next shot. Just based on their resume, I mean, definitely deserve it over McGregor or Lamas. And I've been real back and forth on this fight. I'm torn on it. I can make a case for either guy. Swanson hasn't had to deal with many wrestlers in his run at featherweight, and actually, I don't think any at all. I think the last wrestler he fought was Ricardo Lamas. And he was winning that fight, by the way, before getting submitted. But Mendes and Lamas, his only 2 losses since the Aldo fight. In the last 4 years, his only 2 losses other than Aldo, and both wrestlers. So I think that's a bit telling, and obviously Edgar has that wrestling. Swanson's 6-fight win streak he's been on, George Roop, Ross Pearson, Oliveira, Poirier, Seaver, and Jeremy Stevens. None of those guys are wrestlers. All guys willing to strike with him. Seaver even took him down early in their fight and was able to hold him down in that first round. So I think Edgar's wrestling could definitely give Swanson some problems here. Something that he hasn't had to deal with in a very long time. Edgar also obviously has very good movement, but he's still extremely hittable. Going back to the Gray Maynard fights and definitely the first Ben Henderson fight, Edgar's really hittable, and even at featherweight, most notably in his fight with Charles Oliveira. I mean, Edgar won that fight, but he wasn't dominant. I wouldn't say he was dominant at all. I mean, Oliveira I thought that fight was fairly even on the feet, and Edgar does enough to get by and get the win, but he gets hit and beat up in the process as well. And just comparing their fights with Oliveira, you see Swanson in his fight, he was able to knock out Oliveira in the first round, and Edgar just doesn't have that kind of power. I mean, he's knocked out Gray Maynard, and obviously a good striker, but he doesn't have that kind of power. I think if they stand for a couple rounds and Edgar's not able to really dominate with his wrestling, I could definitely see Swanson catching him and putting him out. I mean, Swanson's a very powerful guy. Knockouts over George Roop, Pearson, Oliveira, finished Dennis Seaver. Jeremy Stevens gave him some trouble on the feet. That was a fight where I was really impressed with Swanson. He had to go the full 5 rounds and couldn't just make it a brawl. He actually fought a lot more. He had to fight a lot more composed and patient. He had to be a lot more patient in that fight against Stevens. But Edgar he uses a lot of footwork, but he's still very hittable, and it seems like that footwork and movement, it seems like that's more for his own offense, being able to get in and get out, land a strike here and there. His movement, I think, benefits his own offense more than it serves to frustrate his opponent's offense. I could see Edgar getting the takedowns, outpointing him on the feet, but I just think over 5 rounds, I don't see Edgar putting him away early. And over 5 rounds, Swanson, both Edgar and Swanson get stronger as the fight goes on. I think Edgar was able to knock out Maynard in their second fight after taking the severe punishment. Also came back from the same kind of punishment in the first fight. The fight with Aldo, Edgar, after losing that first round, was able to keep the fight pretty competitive, great at making adjustments. But I just think Swanson, with his power and also uses a lot of movement himself, comes from odd angles, uses a lot of lateral movement, not quite the same footwork as Edgar, but is able to mix it up on the feet, attack from different angles. I think I got to go with Swanson. I think he's gonna hurt Edgar later in the fight. I could see him finishing off Edgar as the fight goes on, or just winning a decision. But again, I think Edgar's gonna win the first couple of rounds, mixing up the wrestling with the striking. But as the fight goes on and it plays out more on the feet, I gotta go with Swanson, just having the power advantage, and I think he's gonna be able to land a high volume on Edgar. So I got to go with Swanson here, which should be an extremely competitive fight, and I'm definitely not confident in it because it is a bad matchup skill-wise for Swanson. I think just having to fight a guy who can mix up striking and wrestling, which he just hasn't faced in a really long time. So I think it's going to be very close. But those are my predictions for UFC Fight Night 57, Edgar versus Swanson. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Please like the video, comment, challenge me on any of my picks, subscribe, and I'll be back with my predictions for 181 Hendricks versus Lawler 2. Thanks, guys. Take care. I'll see you next time. Bye.